It's 16 minutes past 4, and we have Dr. Taz Walker on the line from Creation Ministries International. Of course, it's CMI time, being Tuesday afternoon. Good afternoon, Dr. Taz.
Oh, good afternoon, Mick. It's really good to hear your voice again.
It's awesome to have you on the line. And, of course, if anyone has any questions of Dr. Taz, please send them through to our text line, 0401 949 949. And we like to be able to answer those questions on air, if possible, 0401 949 949. And, of course, Dr. Taz, he's a creationist mechanical engineer, a geologist, and works with CMI Australia. So he can talk to us about anything to do with creation, evolution, dinosaurs, aliens, all sorts of interesting things. And, of course, I always throw things at you guys, Dr. Taz, like, what's been happening in the news over the last week or two.
Yeah, keep us on our toes, Mick, and it's always a nice challenge to talk to you.
And, of course, I've already sort of given you the heads up not very long ago, just this afternoon, in regards to a story that I saw in Science Alert. Now, it wasn't the first place that I saw it. I saw the headline the other day and I went, what? And I looked again. And then when I saw it again in Science Alert, I thought, I've got to ask you about this. Because apparently, you know, we hear all the time about the people that came before. What are we called now? The type of humans?
We're called Homo sapiens.
Okay, and prior to Homo sapiens, there were Neanderthals.
That's right. They talk about Neanderthals being. They used to call it the missing link, and but the ideas about Neanderthals have been changing a lot over the last few decades, and then there are other names for other particular candidates that they put up for the evolution of the humans. But it changes a lot because it's so speculative and the ideas about Neanderthals have changed a lot since they first were discovered.
Of course, there's stories talking about Neanderthals, and we've heard many times, even Dr. John says, Neanderthals are just a type of human. They had different features to us, but pretty much, very, very, very close, almost the same thing. And I mean, we know that over time, even family groups end up with different facial features, different looks. You can get some families that are all really tall, and it's a family trait that's carried on for generations. And some of them have, bigger noses or bigger teeth or, different cheekbones. And it's just, I guess we see these things all the time, yet this was a particular group of people that have been singled out over time. And now scientists are saying, hey, we've started looking at their DNA, and one thing missing in the Neanderthal DNA that comes through to most of us all of us have DNA from Neanderthals apparently, but we're missing the Neanderthal Y chromosome.
Well, they're missing one particular gene in the Y chromosome, which is supposed to be a characteristic or a distinctive Neanderthal gene. And the idea is that all humans, we have got that what they say are Neanderthal genes in us, which is interesting, and that's interpreted one particular way by people who believe that Neanderthals evolved into humans. But from a biblical creationist perspective, there's a whole different way of looking at things. It's interesting how Neanderthals were first discovered. They were discovered in a cave in the Neander Valley. So Neanderthal, and it comes from that. And Neander, there's some Christian hymns written by a guy called Neander, which is also very fascinating. But these particular remains of this particular person, the Neanderthal in that valley, it was the bones were a little bit deformed, and it had slightly different facial features, skull features. And so it was portrayed as being the missing link. And basically what they did, the pictures which were drawn at that time, of course, to promoting the idea that evolution happened, that we evolved from apes, it had these creatures really looking like apes. They had long hair on them, they were stooped over, and they looked very primitive. But the image of Neanderthal has changed a lot over the time, and we've discovered that Neanderthals, the caves, they used to paint amazing pictures on the caves, so they had that skill. Also, they were able to use fire, which was a feature of being a human. And they also made jewelry, and the women like to adorn themselves in jewelry.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that they did is they were able to make musical instruments. So we find all those various features indicating that they were basically did all the things that the humans do, and so regarded as human. And the other thing is that of course, the DNA between the two. So obviously, Neanderthals and modern humans, what it calls Homo sapiens, used to intermarry, interbreed, you could say, and so that's one of the regarding that they're the same created humankind. And so, from a biblical perspective, we have a different way of understanding Neanderthals, different way of understanding humans, where we came from, and that always provides a totally amazing perspective on things. It gives new insights and things to the way things happened.
When I was reading this story, they were questioning. I guess it's because they don't know the answer, but questioning, why is this part of the gene that has the Y chromosome? Why is it missing? It's like this big question, and I started thinking, well, hang on, if this is just like one of the people that had this, and I mean, when we get our genes, or rather that's pretty much what they do. We send our test kit away to find out where we come from. That's a gene test kit, isn't it?
That's right. They test the DNA. That's right, and be able to identify it, yeah.
And we get all different bits of all sorts of things, and they say, well, you get a little bit of somebody from Russia and someone from somewhere else at different times, and of course, that's we've all got this little bit of Neanderthal, DNA in us somehow. However, in this case, it was missing that piece, and it's missing out of absolutely everybody. And I was thinking to myself, well, it only had to be missing from one single person if they got onto the boat with Noah.
Yes, that's right. So that's where we look at things differently, because we believe the real history of the world is that all the people alive today are descended from the eight humans who were on Noah's Ark and survived the flood. And so those eight humans had all the DNA, which has been passed from generation to generation to people now right throughout the world. And so it's, as you say, it could have been that one of the people on the Noah's Ark was carrying the genes which we identify as Neanderthal genes, and some people say the idea is that one male chromosome. That's the Y chromosome, which was passed on by Noah. So Noah, he was the father of the three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Yep. So there was one male chromosome passed on to his three sons, and so there's a commonality there. Although the two daughters, or three daughters, daughters-in-law who married Noah's sons, they also had genetics which was passed on, and so there could have been certain chromosomes passed through the mitochondrial DNA, which were variants, and so all that sort of comes together to provide a very interesting scenario, very interesting research framework in which to try to understand what's happening genetically.
It seems so much easier from a Christian point of view to see how that little piece could go missing at that particular point in time. We can virtually put our finger on it. But I guess from a worldly perspective, there's all these questions, and that's why they don't seem to have an answer, because they don't have this point of, just only a few people coming together during the Great Flood. They don't believe that. So I guess that's why it leaves all those questions for them.
Yes, so they got the idea that originally there were apes and no humans, There were genetic mutations which occurred, which ultimately caused these apes to evolve, and they've got proposed a various scenario for how they evolved into various, Homo afarensis and those sorts of things. And but really, when you look at it, the results are either ape or human. There's variations in human, and we would call a Neanderthal a variation within the human range of variation. Mm-hmm. And that's why they can interbreed. And that's really what a species is defined as, is creatures being able to interbreed. Mm. And Neanderthals and humans, there's evidence that they've interbred. So that points to them being, the same created kind.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's interesting, isn't it? You're on 94.9 this afternoon. Yeah. Look, we're going to have to come back very shortly. We've got a little break coming up now. It is 27 minutes past 4, and I think when we come back, we might have a bit of a chat about the Glasshouse Mountains as well.
My favourite.
Excellent, excellent. We're with Dr. Taz from Creation Ministries International. If you do have any questions, please send them through 0401 949 949. That's our text line. You're on 94.9. It is 23 minutes to 5. And we have Dr. Taz Walker on the line, and he's from Creation Ministries International. Dr. Taz is super smart when it comes to things like geology and engineering. And I'd noticed, Dr. Taz, you wrote a story about looking into the Glasshouse Mountains in Australia. And I've got to say, every time I go to Queensland and I go anywhere near that area and you can see the Glasshouse Mountains, they take my breath away. They're an amazing vision. Like, you drive past them and just think, how did those things get there? And I noticed in your story that they got there in a completely different way to the way I guessed. I just assumed they were all mountains and, water running through there after the flood did it, like so many other areas, like down around our Hawkesbury. But no, they're a bit different.
Yeah, so they are, as you say, they are glorious mountains, and the shapes of them as they stick out of the flat landscape really is spectacular. And believe it or not, that's where there's a famous zoo there called the Australia Zoo, which was really made famous by the Australian crocodile hunter, Steve Irwin.
Yes.
The late Steve Irwin. So that's in that area as well. And there must be at least a dozen of these Glasshouse Mountains sticking up. The tallest one is Mount Beerwah, which is over 550 metres high, and so that's cool. And then there's a lot of others. There's one called Canowrin, which is you wouldn't know what that means, but it's actually used to be called Crookneck because it's a volcanic plug. It's the neck of a volcano, and it does look like a neck. And so that's
you say the neck of a volcano. What is a volcanic plug?
A volcanic plug. So what happens is, underneath the earth, what happens at different times in the history of the earth, and basically this happened during Noah's flood.
Yep.
So movements in the earth crust makes this volcanic lava, they call it magma, collect together under the crust, and then it squeezes up through a crack or through a hole onto the surface. And so that forms a volcano. Yes, we see lots of volcanoes around the world. Some of them are active, and some of them are no longer active. They're dormant. But these ones are believed to be extinct. That's what they call them, extinct. But it didn't happen it wasn't that long ago when they occurred during Noah's flood, which was about 4,500 years ago, and towards the end of the flood. So a lot of stuff had happened in the first 6 months or more of the flood, and then as the waters of as the ocean basins were sinking down, the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean basins, the water from the continents was flowing into the oceans. But also, what happened is that the movement of the crust of the earth caused this volcanic lava to come up and form volcanoes. So you got all these volcanoes which are just poking up there, and then as the waters were flowing off, they eroded the areas around the volcanoes, exposing the plugs.
Right.
So that particular volcanic rock, it's rich in, they say it's aluminium and silica. So it's a light-coloured rock. It can be sort of a yellowy colour or a light colour, light grey, something like that. And it's thick like porridge. And so when it squeezes up, it forms these domes, blobs that stick up, or it might explode because it's so thick. But the lava can also be rich in other minerals like iron and magnesium, and it forms a black rock called basalt. And so you find the basalt is not far away from these glasshouse mountains. It's up at the Mullaney Plateau, which is just 5 or 10 kilometres north of them, and so you can see beautiful basalt rocks there. So they form rich soils, which are rich in a red colour, and sometimes they're a chocolate colour. But these glasshouse mountains are evidence, that they formed during Noah's flood, and as the waters receded, it eroded all the material around them, carried it out to sea, and exposed these glasshouse mountains.
And you mentioned that you don't go very far from this sort of volcanic plugs, and they're sandstone plateaus, so they're not.
Yes,
they're not made of like cooled lava.
That's right. So the Noah's flood, of course, involved lots of water, and the water eroded rocks, and it created lots of sand and gravel and that sort of thing, and it washed it into a huge area. Actually covers most of northern Australia, so it goes from Cape York down into the remains of it, from Cape York down into the middle of New South Wales, across into South Australia, and also touches in Northern Territory. So there's an enormous area of sediment which is deposited. And amazingly, this area of sediment, as it was deposited, there are lots of animals which were caught up in it. Some of them were still alive, particularly animals which were good at swimming, which are dinosaurs, and also plesiosaurs, marine animals. And these were actually eventually overwhelmed and buried by the sediment. And so that sediment extends right out to this area of the Glasshouse Mountains. And then when the ocean basins were sinking, the volcanic lava pushed up through this sediment and formed these volcanic blobs. And then as the floods continued to recede, the water continued to recede, it eroded the material around the volcanic plugs. So it all sort of is connected together. It didn't take millions of years. If you look at the sign, it says that they formed over 25 million years. And that's based on an assumption. They assumed that there never was a global flood. So they assumed that it was just the rainfall and just the falling in the area which eroded these things slowly over millions of years.
It just seems so much easier to believe that there was a flood, though. When you see these giant plains of sandstone with these volcanic things, which are the Glasshouse Mountains, sticking up all over the place, you'd sort of think, okay, if it's a volcanic area, it would be completely covered by, I guess, super cool lava now, but it's not. It's
not.
It's covered by sandstone. So it makes sense that the flood could have done that. I can't imagine a non-flood scenario being able to do that.
That's right. And in many ways, these from a non-flood perspective, geologists often wrestle. There's often unsolved puzzles, unsolved problems that they have, which they're trying to solve. But the flood actually provides a very simple historical scenario for how the waters moved, which explains what we actually see. I meet people. We go around and I actually do a field trip in the area and take a coach load of people around and have a look at it, and they're really fascinated, and I point different things out, and they come back and they say, "Wow, I never saw any evidence for the flood, but now I see it everywhere." And so that's what happens is once you're alert to it and see what's going on and understand how it works, you see the evidence everywhere, as you said.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, I can remember the first time I ever saw one of the CMI guys out at, I think they were at one of the churches, Impact, here on the Central Coast. And, I went in there having really no idea. And honestly, by the time I walked out, I was sort of thinking, yep, it takes a lot more faith to believe that the flood didn't happen than the flood did happen. It just seems natural or normal that the flood must have happened because, nothing else fits. And of course,
nothing else fits.
Yeah, with everything you're saying about the Glasshouse Mountains and the sandstone plateaus around, it just makes so much sense. And,
it does.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed exploring them, and I wrote a brochure about them, which is available on creation.com. You can just find it there and download it. People can download it and print it on a colour printer, and fold it up into three, and it's a nice little brochure, or you can buy them. So I do that. It's interesting. I took it off to a tourist place there at the Glasshouse Mountains, and where they've got all this stuff about millions of years and all the information about it.
Yep.
And I took it into the guys, and I said, "Oh, look, I've got this brochure about it. Thought you could be interested in it." And they said, "Oh, thanks. We'll have a look at it." But then they wrote back and said, "Oh no, it's religious. We don't want to touch anything religious."
Oh, you're kidding?
And I think, yeah. So it's amazing, isn't it, how sort of people are not exposed to other ideas because the gatekeepers will sort of say, no, we're not going to put that up here.
I mean, it's religious, but scientifically it makes so much sense. And sadly,
that's right.
The scientists that aren't religious are the ones that are all asking the questions and still scratching their head.
That's right. That's right. And so, the Bible says, your word is a lamp to my feet. It's a lamp shows us the way, shows us what the footpath is like, shows us what the track is like. And so it works out like this when we're looking at the geology, but it works out like this in our lives when we're wondering about where to go in our lives, what to do in our lives, and the various problems that we have. It's the Word of God often just will provide a light for us and a way ahead, and it's actually really fantastic.
Absolutely. Oh, Dr. Taz Walker, thank you so much. What an awesome afternoon. And, of course, you can find that information on creation.com, including the story that I read that sort of blew my mind, Looking into the Glasshouse Mountains, Australia by Taz Walker. And, of course, Dr. Taz, you've got a lot of other really cool stories on there. People can just click on your name and they'll end up getting all of those stories. But, we've come to the end of another awesome week. Thank you so much for being with us this week.
Thanks so much, Mick. I tell you what, it doesn't take long, does it? I just say hello and now we've got to say goodbye.
I know. It's because you talk about such interesting stuff. It seems to just fly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Taz. It is 12 minutes to 5. You're on 94.9.